may I introduce to you the rather nice image of Dr. John Golden. Dr. John Golden, apart from being a very distinguished consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist, is somebody who has had an affection and an affinity with the association and its forerunners, chiefly mediated by his late father, I suspect, who was Henry Golden, a distinguished plastic surgeon of Southern African origin. When I mentioned to some colleagues that we were fortunate enough to have John talking to us tonight, they all said, you've got A, the real expert, and B, the person who can really explain these complex issues about the role of social media and mental health in a way that others are not generally able to do. They also said that he was able to explain it to parliamentarians as well. And so it's an opportune moment, because maybe he's got an opportunity to talk to some new parliamentarians and ministers in the near future. And I hope he manages to explain it to them very clearly and lucidly. They may need it. Anyway, John.
Thanks so much, David. Okay, well, I was going to say nice to see you all, but nice to be here anyway. You can't see me, I can't see you. But I'm going to be talking on the risks and benefits of social media for the mental health of adolescents, as David was saying. Have we got until 9, David, or what?
Yes, well, there isn't a guillotine.
Okay, and we're starting.
We'll give you some leeway because you've lost about 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. So this is an overview of what I'm going to be talking about. The wider context that we're all somewhat familiar with, obviously, with social media being used more and more in the last 10 years, especially amongst young people, how prevalent it is. I'm going to talk a little bit about some clinical examples during the talk. I'm going to talk about things like self-harm, deliberate self-harm, eating disorders such as anorexia, safeguarding issues, of which there are a lot associated with the use of social media. And I want to also talk about some possible solutions and positive examples. I mean, sometimes when I've given this talk, maybe to parents, they said, well, the message seems to be we should all panic and it's really bad news. But I mean, I want to be nuanced and balanced about it. There is, sadly, quite a lot of challenging stuff out there for sure, but there's also positive aspects to social media, and maybe particularly during the pandemic, it was a lifesaver for some young people, perhaps, that they were able to stay in touch with their friends when they were kind of isolating at home. And we'll conclude at the end. So this looks like a fairly familiar image to many of you, no doubt. I've got 2 teenage daughters. They sometimes look a bit like this, plugged in with their headphones and looking at their phone. It's very ubiquitous, as we know: Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, etc., etc. This is a family, which may be a typical family or may not be, but we all probably look at screens far too much, including when we're together with our family, and we need to be conscious of that as adults and parents, as well as young people in the family. It's quite a sort of egocentric thing in many ways, and there is this cartoon about the ego system, that the thing that unites all of social media is that the user, me, the person, is kind of at the center of it all. And it's a kind of mixed blessing. In some ways, it's great to share stuff with other people. In other aspects, it is kind of quite egocentric, and we need to be conscious of that as well. And whether it's actually encouraging unhelpful behavior in our young people, the amount that people use it. So why do people use social media? They use it for why do young people use social media? They use it for many different reasons. They use it to communicate with each other. I run an inpatient unit, the Mildred Creek unit at Great Ormond Street. So I've actually been there 20 years this month. And one of the things we've discussed on the unit is, should children have phones when they're on the unit? And we're a children's unit. We go up sort of 7 to 14-year-olds, and we take the view that they can't have smartphones on the unit. They're unwell when they come to us. If they were to take a photo of another young person and post it online, that would be obviously really bad news and a big breach of confidentiality. Adolescent units have a slightly more flexible approach about that, but I think some young people feel almost like one of their limbs is being cut off when they don't have their smartphone with them. And so communication and keeping in touch with friends is a really important part of why people use it. And of course, you can communicate in other ways, including face-to-face. Self-esteem is one aspect of why young people use it. They're seeking likes. They're seeking positive feedback to things that they're posting online. And that's a mixed blessing. Sometimes people do get that boost to their self-esteem, but sometimes people, might feel if I don't get 100 likes in the first 20 minutes, then no one likes me, kind of thing. So things can get somewhat distorted amongst young people in this area. They use it for self-expression, for confidence, for popularity, entertainment as well. Young people don't really watch TV so much anymore. Teenagers, they're watching things on YouTube. They're watching memes and short video clips on TikTok, and really it's a kind of source of entertainment and a sense of belonging as well, which I'm going to be talking about a bit more later. In some ways, that's really good, that people feel that they can belong to groups with like-minded people. But if it's a group of people with eating disorders, for example, and the other people are encouraging you to be a better anorexic, which sadly is very prevalent, then that's obviously bad news. And we'll be talking a bit more about that later. And young people use it as well to keep up and receive information. I'm quite active on Twitter, and originally, a number of years ago, I used to subscribe to the view that Twitter was for twits, but now it is actually, I find it very useful, particularly as a way of keeping up and receiving information, sharing articles, journal articles, news articles, and so on. So how long are young children spending online? This is the RCPCH did a survey a couple of years ago. It's not a huge sample, 109 children, but this is what they told them in a typical day that they were spending online. About 2.5 hours on a computer, laptop, or tablet, about 3 hours on their phone, and about 2 hours watching TV. So if you're thinking maybe you're in bed, hopefully for about 8 hours sleeping, that's 16 hours. And so 7.5, that's pretty much half your waking time online in some way, which is probably fairly typical for a young person. Of course, some of that time is doing homework, hopefully, and studying as well. But people are spending an awful lot of time online. This is something about the current trends of social media. So most teenagers seem to use Instagram. It's got huge user numbers, very popular. Snapchat is one where I think people get a bit of a false sense of security, because as one young person said, the whole point is you can say what you want and then it's gone. So with Snapchat, you send a message and then within 30 seconds it disappears. But of course, people can take screenshots. The concern is that people feel that they can maybe send naked selfies to a boyfriend or girlfriend and no one else will see it, but you can do a screenshot. Cyberbullying is quite prevalent on Snapchat. Again, people feel that they can get away with it because it's going to disappear. But that doesn't mean it's still not harmful. So Snapchat is a challenge for many young people. TikTok has become hugely popular, especially during lockdown. And there are short videos that are posted. I've seen pediatricians do videos on, importance of vaccination and things like that. And, they do some great public information about that. I think their dance moves are better than mine. So I haven't tried that particular one, but I've seen, for example, a Canadian pediatrician who gives a really nice message on TikTok. There's also a huge issue about some young people having like 1 million followers or more sometimes, posting images of functional seizures, for example, non-epileptic seizures. And this has really become a bit of a craze looking at this, and we're seeing clinical increases in the presentations of functional seizures, for example, functional tics as well. That's very widespread. It's just an example of how it's impacting on clinical presentations. But TikTok is very widely used. Twitter, as I mentioned, I'm fairly active on that. It's probably more adults than teenagers use it. But one teenager said you can share photos, videos, direct messaging, best of them all in one place. Facebook is generally seen as uncool. It's pointless. It's for old people. So maybe the generation of myself and the people watching this might use Facebook more than your average teenager. WhatsApp will be very familiar with that, often with family members. It's got end-to-end encryption, so the government are a bit concerned about some dodgy messages and groupings that can go on, and that it can't be traced so easily. So sometimes terrorist groups are thought to use it. But WhatsApp is, I use it every day, and it's a good way of sharing photos and things like that, messages with people. YouTube is one of the more positive ones in terms of the impact on mental health. The research has suggested that young people watch videos that are quite educational, often on YouTube. Of course, there's dodgy stuff on YouTube as well. There's this jargon, which many of you will be familiar with: streaks, deep likes, and ghosting. So a deep like is a kind of faux pas where you like something maybe more than 24 hours after it was actually posted. And that is seen as not cool amongst young people. You know, if you're going to like something, you should like it pretty quickly, which adds to the sense that you should kind of be on your phone and checking things pretty regularly to avoid being uncool and liking something too long after it was actually posted. Streaks is when you have to it's a bit like a game of ping pong, when you send a message on Snapchat and the other person has to send a message straight back, and they kind of go backwards and forwards within certain time limits, and then Snapchat and other apps send you kind of colorful balloons or positive feedback in various forms that your streak is now 500, and sometimes children go on holiday and they don't have their phone with them necessarily, and they ask other people to continue the streak. So the point I'm making is that these companies have ways of keeping you online, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, sort of dopamine labs and the research that these companies do to find ways of keeping young people online as much as possible. Ghosting is when, you know, someone sends you a message and you just ignore it, kind of thing. And that can feel quite bad to many young people, understandably. Emojis. Some older people seem to use a lot of emojis. I know my mother, who's in her 80s, probably uses too many emojis. More than 3 is seen as a little immature nowadays, and they're hard to see as well if you're a bit long-sighted. But limit your emojis is the advice of that particular young person. And social media is a blessing and a curse, as one 17-year-old girl said, and I think that's a pretty good summary, actually. It's got really positive and quite negative aspects. So it wasn't that long ago, 15 years ago, that smartphones first came in, the first iPhone. Feels like we've had them forever. And there has been a real increase in prevalence of depression and anxiety in young people over the past 10 or 15 years. We think that young people with mental health problems may be more vulnerable to the harmful effects of social media, a kind of digital divide. So if you've got a pre-existing mental health difficulty, you might be more vulnerable to cyberbullying, or someone encouraging you to self-harm, or encouraging you to be a better anorexic. So, you know, it's a kind of a bit of a chicken and egg situation, that there's that vulnerability, but also probably when you are online, that will, you know, increase your risks of difficulties. And if you're a more resilient young person, you can maybe use social media and not be impacted negatively in the same way that someone else might be, who's more vulnerable. There is this big study that I mentioned also in the summary that I think David sent out before the talk. It was the UK NHS digital study, which showed that rates of probable mental disorders have increased since 2017. When this came out in 2020, it was quite a big media storm about it, the increase of probable mental disorders from 1 in 6 1 in 6 in 2020, an increase from 1 in 9 in 2017. So that was really quite a worrying increase in the rates of probable mental health difficulties. I will talk about correlation and causation. Obviously, we can't say that smartphones have caused this, but there is a clear correlation here. In terms of online trends, massive numbers of social media users in the world, nearly half the world's population, over 3.5 billion people. Most people don't go more than an hour without checking their phones. And even as I read that, my phone is here, and there's a little part of me that wants to check my phone. I'm sure that other people could identify with that as well. And young people are particularly affected by that. Nearly half of young people in the West spend 10 hours a day online. You know, there's different surveys, different studies out there. They say slightly different things, but the message is fairly similar in terms of really large numbers of time spent online. And Anne Longfield, who many of you will remember as the previous Children's Commissioner, she retired soon after this quote. She retired sort of around March last year, I think. She said that children will be angry looking back at the wild and dangerous online world they were exposed to. And I think that's quite a powerful quote, and I think that's true. I think we as adults have a real responsibility to protect young people, and they are seeing things online, pornography, self-harm, etc., that they should not be seeing at ages that they are seeing them. And I will come on to talk a little bit about the lobbying that I and others have been involved in from the Royal College of Psychiatrists and elsewhere, of politicians, and the Online Harms Bill. which unfortunately has been quite stalled with all the shenanigans recently in government, and the change of government. But there's a lot more that we should be doing to protect young people. And I think if young people were exposed to the kind of things that they are online in real life, you know, I'm sitting in my dining room right now. If there was sort of if there was pornography or something left lying around, that would be a safeguarding issue if young people were in the house. Whereas on your phone, you could kind of access it really quite easily. So I think we really need to think about that. We also have this business model with Facebook and other apps for the first time in the whole of human history, that we have this pervasive business model which encourages children to post photos and videos of themselves often, and be rated across the globe in terms of likes and comments. Now that's that's not my quote. I think that might be from Frances Haugen, who's the whistleblower from Facebook, and I'll say a bit more about her. She was prominent in the media about a year ago. But, you know, that is really quite striking that, you know, a young person, and this happens all the time, young people are posting images of themselves and they're waiting to see what people think, and people can comment from across the world, and often they will be quite cruel, and people can be quite cruel behind, you know, their keyboard and behind the anonymity of the internet, and young people are being affected by this, and profit has really come before young people's mental health and welfare. I do quite a lot of media interviews on TV and radio, and this is quite a common thing that I say, is that these social media companies need to move their priorities, and they need to move the mental health of young people higher up their priority list, above, you know, profit. But that's easy to say and not so easy to actually implement, and we do need to legislate more to make that happen, I think, because they're not really doing it in a voluntary way. They want the data from young people, they want the revenue, and they're making huge profits, really at the expense of many of our young people's mental health, sadly. So this is Frances Haugen, who I did mention, a whistleblower. Some of you will have watched her giving her testimony in the States in October 21. She said that Facebook puts astronomical profits before people. She was a brave woman. She was senior in Facebook, and she decided to whistleblow. She said that Instagram is like cigarettes for under 18s in terms of the addictive quality of it. And their algorithms, which we don't know enough about, people who don't work in these companies, they're not very transparent, but they can lead teenagers from healthy eating content, for example, to anorexia-related content. So if you're a 16-year-old girl and you look up healthy eating, it won't be very long before you start getting led into anorexia-related content through what is, you know, comes onto your feed on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. And Facebook knows that Instagram is quite harmful for teenage girls, especially in relation to body image. They said, their own research said, we make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 girls. And teenagers are also worried about Instagram, and they say that they blame it for the increases in the rate of anxiety and depression, and that's quite consistent across all groups. Now, this is research that Facebook did themselves. They tried to spin it in a slightly different way when Frances Haugen started talking about it. And I don't think they really publicized some of their findings as much as they would have maybe they should have done, for obvious reasons, because they weren't very happy with some of the findings. The Five Rights Foundation, you should maybe Google that if you're interested. I've been to various meetings with them in Parliament, and they're a coalition group which really looks at trying to legislate to improve the situation. And they say that Facebook's own research is a devastating indictment of the carelessness with which it and the tech sector more broadly treats children. Facebook is buying its profit with our safety. So we do need greater transparency, and we do need more scrutiny of the algorithms, and we do need more data about this. And they don't share the data that they have, these social media companies. And we at the Royal College of Psychiatrists and people who work in child mental health and so on would like to do more research in the area. And part of that is if they share their data more openly, which they're not doing currently. And Facebook really does target young kids, you know, for example, kids as young as 8 for their Messenger Kids app, and it's more and more common to see 2, 3-year-olds on their tablets. Some young people I've come across, you know, don't try and swipe a book, you know, well, you know, because they're so used to swiping on a tablet, and they're not so familiar with books. I have come across that, which is rather sad. I realise I am being rather negative, and I will say some positive things as well, but I do think it's quite worrying. and I think we need to be more aware of what's out there. This is a study which said that across the EU, over 10% of children said that in a year they've seen things on the internet that have disturbed them. Nearly 2/3 of children have met offline with people that they've been contacted by online without their parents' knowledge. And you can imagine, I mean, that's huge numbers of children, and you can imagine the risks associated with that. People can easily pretend to be, different age online, and when young people have their location services on their phone and they're chatting with someone that they may not know exactly who they are, that person can work out where they live or where they go to school or where they're based, which is obviously a risk. So we as parents, as adults, need to be aware of this, and so do young people. A key part of all this is education, which is one of the things that kind of motivates me to share the kind of information I am today. We all need to just be better educated about it. Unfortunately, young people, as I was saying earlier, who have pre-existing vulnerabilities, so for example, with a history of self-harm, they're more likely to be groomed by paedophiles and meet up with the paedophiles in person. And also there's suicide sites and social media sites that promote suicide. There's one site that I've come across which talks about meeting at the bus stop and catching the bus. So meeting at the bus stop is meeting with other young people or other adults sometimes and discussing whether or not you're going to catch the bus, and catching the bus is attempting to commit suicide. And so you'll get people encouraging you to catch the bus, and you'll get maybe other people being a bit more helpful, encouraging you not to, and thinking alternative ways of managing your feelings. But they discuss, different techniques, how painful it is, how long it will take one to die, and so on. And that's pretty worrying, obviously. And you'll all probably remember the death of Molly Russell. I've met her father, who's a lovely man, who really is doing a lot of promoting about the risks of Instagram and images of self-harm. His daughter was exposed to a really toxic digital mix, was the way they kind of described it. And at that time, Instagram announced it would ban all graphic self-harm images. Molly Russell had been in her bedroom looking at a lot of self-harm images before she committed suicide. And Instagram haven't really fully followed through on that. I think they've done something, but they could do a lot more. And some people would argue it's a bit like that game of whack-a-mole, where you bash one thing down and then another one pops up somewhere else. So it is a challenge, but Instagram and other social media companies could be doing a great deal more, really. This is just something about how school children wouldn't tell their parents if they were upset by something online, often over half of them, because they'd be worried probably that their parents would say, you can't use your phone as much as you do. We're going to ban it, or we're going to limit it more. So young people are quite secretive sometimes about things that they see online that are upsetting, whereas they would, this big survey of 10,000 pupils showed that people would tell their teacher if they're upset by something face to face. If another child bullied them in the playground or something, they might tell a teacher much more likely than they would if they were bullied or something upsetting happening online. So children are suffering in silence, is what I'm saying in many ways. And there's been a big increase in CAMS referrals. I mean, that's a bit out of date. In the last few years, there's been a very significant increase, much more than that, especially due to the pandemic and so on. But there is this correlation with significant increase in a range of child mental health problems and increased use of social media. As I said earlier, we mustn't confuse correlation with causation. So I'm not trying to say that social media is the cause of all the increased risk, increased mental health difficulties amongst young people. But I don't think we can ignore that. And some people say that, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And I do think that there are concerns as I'm outlining. There isn't evidence from neuroscience studies that internet use harms the adolescent brain. We haven't got that. We know that sort of in terms of social interaction and empathy, teenagers who use social media, sometimes it can enhance existing friendships and the quality of relationships. And that is for some more than others. And it's probably for people who have a sort of pre-existing degree of resilience and secure attachments and those kind of things are more likely to be able to use social media in a positive way. But if it's kind of used, this is a paper from the BMJ, one example of how if it's used to avoid social difficulties, there is reduced well-being. But if it's used to deal with social challenges, the outcomes improve. And as I said earlier, I do think that during the pandemic, social media had some real advantages in terms of staying in touch with friends when you were quite socially isolated. Young people need to learn to access online space thoughtfully and responsibly. I mean, there's a lot of education at schools about it. We've just had induction at a lot of schools in the last couple of days. And I know they've been talking about use of social media amongst other things. And as I say, there's a lot of huge knowledge out there, a huge availability of knowledge out there, information about the world. I remember when I was a teenager, we had sort of an Encyclopedia Britannica and about 3 shelves of encyclopedias, and you want to look something up, you might get a bit excited, but it'd take you a little while to sort of find it. Whereas now it's really at your fingertips, knowledge about anything really, which is, you know, in some ways amazing, and in other ways a bit worrying, just how easily young people can access things that are not helpful for them. I think I've mentioned most of this already, you know, that people will say more behind a computer screen than they would in real life. Cyberbullying is a big problem, and you know, young people will sometimes have their phone with them, you know, overnight, and it will ping, and they'll be tempted, you know, wake them up, and they'll be tempted to have a look. And if it is a sort of bullying comment, that will prevent them sleeping, falling back to sleep. They'll be worried, they'll be anxious, they'll be lying awake in the middle of the night, upset by what they've read. I mean, I do really encourage parents to get their children's phones, you know, charging in the kitchen at night, together with the adults' phones. I mean, the adults need to kind of monitor that and, demonstrate that. There's a word I'm looking for that I've forgotten. Model that, thank you. Model that for their young people. And, you know, if we're, as parents, looking at our phone last thing at night and it's next to our bed, then a young person will find that hard to have it charging in the kitchen. And I do know as a parent, it's not always easy to implement this sort of thing, but if possible, that is helpful, to not have the phone in your bedroom at night. There's a lot of age inappropriate content out there. I've mentioned location services. I've mentioned child protection issues, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail, and this inappropriate content that's out there. This is a survey carried out by the charity Girl Guiding. And young people are really worried about, for example, girls especially, this image of a perfect life on social media that many people sort of portray. And it's affecting their well-being. You know, the bar is very high when you look at other people's images sometimes, and you think, oh, I don't look like that, or my life's not as exciting or glamorous as that. Of course, people don't tend to share the more mundane or unpleasant aspects of life necessarily. They want to sort of share their holidays and the good stuff. But you know, girls particularly are vulnerable to this. Boys are as well. And this poll said that over a third of girls aged 11 to 21 said their biggest worry online was comparing themselves and their lives with others. And I think that absolutely applies to boys and adults as well. Parents struggled really to understand this as a problem. I think that's changing. I think that's, you know, this poll was 2 or 3 years ago. I think, you know, even in the last 2 or 3 years, parents are more aware of this. But girls worry about grooming. They worry about how photos they took could be altered or used out of context online. They worry about threats from strangers. They worry about how they look in photos. They talk about their sense of self being linked to the number of likes that they receive. So young people are very aware of all this. And they also talk about filters and photo editing being detrimental. And one of the things I and others have lobbied for is that when, you know, images are put in magazines of women who look kind of flawless, they're usually edited in some ways. It's usually photoshopped. And, you know, there should be a kind of kite mark, perhaps, to say that this image has been edited. And there has been some lobbying for that to happen. It hasn't really happened as much as we would like it to. But young people should know that these images have been altered, really. That's not a kind of accurate representation of that particular person in many ways. Now, I have mentioned cyberbullying. Sometimes private images can be very widely circulated. So girls are sometimes pressurized by boys. Maybe it will happen the other way around sometimes. To maybe, you know, if you really love me, send me a nude. That's what they talk about, nudes. Send me an image of you topless, or send me a naked image just for me, but then they share it with their mates, and it can very quickly be a really desperate situation. And sadly, I've come across quite a few teenagers clinically who have been really humiliated in that way and regretted sharing an image with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and it has led to suicide sometimes, because this is really public humiliation, which is awful. And, you know, it's a 13, 14-year-old child who's looking for a bit of validation, and unfortunately does it in a way that leads to really big problems. This study by UCL, relatively recently published by Russell Viner and others, 10,000 teenagers and also Imperial College, showed that social media damages children's mental health by ruining their sleep, reducing their exercise levels, and exposing them to cyberbullies in their homes. So one of the things about cyberbullying, one of the things about bullying in the past, without it being on social media, is if you were bullied at school, you could get away with it or get away from it after 5 o'clock, or when you left school. Whereas now it's kind of 24/7 exposure if you're being cyberbullied and it's in your home. So this big study basically was looking at links between social media and mental health, and it looked at kind of mediating influences, and the ones that were most prominent were sleep, so affecting kind of healthy activities such as sleep and exercise. Just say a bit more about sleep, because sleep deprivation is a huge problem, and there is an association between social media use before bed and poor sleep quality. I advise patients and my children and so on not to use social media for an hour before bedtime. The theory is easy and the practice is sometimes harder, as I've already alluded to, but that is the ideal, that you're not looking at a screen just before you go to sleep. The LED lights on screens can stop the natural processes in the brain that release melatonin and so on. Many school students wake up in the middle of the night, check their phones, and then they're tired the next day at school. And that study from UCLH and Imperial found its way into the RCPCH guidance about screen time, that we need to think about the impact on socializing, meeting people face to face, on reduced exercise because you're more static and looking at screens a lot, and interfering with your sleep as well. By the way, there's positive evidence of families that spend face-to-face time together, for example, around meal times. That's good for the mental health of the young people in that family. Whereas if you're sort of looking at your screen or eating separately, that's more detrimental, although it is pretty widespread. Something a bit more about self-harm. There's a lot of images. If you Google image self-harm, you will find an awful lot of unpleasant stuff out there, and young people do this, and there's an element of voyeurism, there's an element of exhibitionism. You can glamorize or romanticize things somewhat. Sometimes people get competitive and say this is real self-harm when you needed to go to A&E and have a lot of stitches, whereas a superficial cut is not proper self-harm. And so, there can be competition between peers. It can be a kind of badge of honor, obviously in a rather distorted way. And young people can sometimes have a sense of belonging by sharing images of self-harm, by getting positive, in inverted commas, feedback from other people, by feeling understood by other young people. And I've already suggested that there's advice online about how to do it, suicide pacts and things. Now, I know this is upsetting. I'm sorry to be sharing this kind of information if you're not aware of it. You probably are aware of it anyway, but we really do need increased awareness of what's out there, because I think as adults, we're not as aware as we should be. And there needs to be education for young people so that they have space to talk about this stuff, talk about stuff that they're seeing and that is upsetting them, and how to manage it really. And it's not dissimilar with eating disorders. There are sites which encourage you to be a better anorexic, in inverted commas. There's sites which talk about finspiration. They talk about thigh gaps. A woman with a big thigh gap is seen as a successful woman, whereas most people who are normal weight don't have a thigh gap. And there's competition, there's peer encouragement, there's tips that are online for being a better anorexic. So these young people have a reduced sense of isolation, but the peer group is often really kind of detrimental to them. And of course, there's helpful stuff online as well about eating disorders. And Beat would be one example of an organization and a website that is really useful. And I often recommend it to patients. It's got a lot of positive stories about recovery, about how to challenge your eating disorder and manage it, and good health advice generally. And you can get mentors and things as well who encourage you to recover and to challenge your eating disorder. This slide is about pro-anorexic websites. So there's a deliberate spelling mistake that I took from the internet. Someone had written, "Please somebody be my Anna buddy," Anna being anorexia, talking about pro-Anna lifestyles. And tips such as, wear a rubber band around your wrist and snap it when you want to eat, because food should equal pain. And anytime you think you want to eat, just remind yourself that food is pain. So lots of tips. Should they be taken down? Well, yes, ideally, I suppose, but it's impossible to fully control it. So we need to be aware that this is out there. We need to be asking our patients whether they're looking at this kind of stuff, discussing it with them. And it is sadly impossible to fully control, but at least we need to open up the dialogue and the communication and the knowledge amongst adults as well about this sort of thing. And there are lots of recovery websites as well. Some of them are in the States, some of them are a bit evangelical and religious occasionally, some of them a bit over the top, like that last bullet point. You can read that for yourself. If you want to eat everything in your kitchen, then go do so, because if your body's asking for the entire content of your kitchen, then your body needs it. I wouldn't really subscribe to that, but you know, that's sort of one extreme to another. But sometimes there are mentors that can be paired with mentees to promote recovery from eating disorders and stories of hope. And I think it's an important message that recovery is possible. I actually did a documentary quite recently that was aired on RTE, the Irish equivalent of the BBC. I could maybe share the link with you, David, and you can put it online if you want to. But it's basically one of our former patients who is now, she was with us about more than 10 years ago on the MCU as a very unwell 10-year-old. And she tells her whole story on this documentary. And I met her, you know, a few months ago when she's now 22. She's a lawyer. She's also a sort of boxer representing Ireland. She's quite a feisty young lady. I think it's an interesting combination to be a boxer and a lawyer, pugnacious. But she really managed to channel her determination and her feistiness, which was channeled in an unhelpful direction by being a very, you know, unwell anorexic, to a much more positive direction now. She really talks about her journey, so I think that's well worth listening to. If you get a chance, I'll share the link. So there's useful stuff that's out there as well about recovery and about the hope that's out there, if you get the right kind of treatment and support. From one cheerful topic to another, safeguarding and pornography. I mean, young people do have a lot of inappropriate exposure to indecent images, sadly, online. It's very easy to pretend you're someone you aren't. Paedophiles will prey on the vulnerable online. I've already said that young people with mental health difficulties are more vulnerable. A lot of people are meeting people offline that they've met online. And there was this, some of you might remember a BBC investigation just over a year ago about OnlyFans, with underage girls faking their age to post explicit content. And they actually you get paid. You can make money out of posting explicit content on OnlyFans. And one young girl used her grandmother's passport, I think, to bypass the sort of very sparse kind of checks and verifications of who's actually posting images. And sadly, a number of young people who've been trafficked or abused, their photos end up on OnlyFans. So it's a very worrying website, really. And they say that they're going to police it and they're going to improve it. I think the situation is still pretty bad on that, sadly, with a lot of worrying stuff, particularly of underage girls on there. I think we need to understand, as well as adults, that sexting, which is sending nudes, sending naked images, sending explicit content online, maybe naked images of yourself, to your boyfriend or girlfriend, it's kind of become part of the normal flirting ritual for many young people. But it is a risky thing to do for the reasons that I've already talked about, how a so-called private image can very often be shared with a much wider audience and can be used to bully and control. And I think, maybe particularly boys who look at pornography and see the kind of thing that's on there, that it influences their expectation of sexual relationships and relationships between boys and girls, and what actually happens when you make love, when you have sex. And it can influence what they expect girls to do. And it can introduce kind of inappropriate expectations into young people's relationships. And some of you will be very aware of Everyone's Invited, which was a big thing last year, and it's a very useful thing that happened. It promoted a discussion of some of the so-called rape culture that's happening in many schools. Highgate School, one of our local schools, was one of the first ones that sort of took this on, and the pupils there started talking about this more and more online, about things that had happened to them, quite harrowing anonymous testimonies, girls talking about sexual violence, particularly at parties. And, this is sadly happening. in a way that we wouldn't obviously want it to be happening, but it's at least being talked about more nowadays. And I know, for example, at Highgate School, that there has been something of a shift in the culture, but this is not just in sort of private schools, this is in state schools, in schools across the country. There's a huge problem going on, and we need to be more aware of it, and young people are taking it upon themselves to share some of their experiences online through things like Everyone's Invited. We do need to help young people address the risk through open discussion and education, so it's not so sort of secretive and they don't feel that they can't talk about it. I want to talk a bit about the addiction aspect of social media. And these companies are really aware, and they employ psychologists to tweak their algorithms to manipulate young people to increase their time spent online. You can Google dopamine labs and find out a bit more about this. The aim is really to make apps as addictive as possible. Swipe down is a little bit like slot machines. When you're on an app, you swipe down for the next thing. When you're on certain apps and you're interested in one topic, it will feed you more similar topics so it encourages you to kind of stay online, looking at videos or watching content. Hashtag truth about tech is out there on the internet. So that talks about a range of techniques to make social media addictive if you want to find out more. And when you post something, there's variable reinforcement because you don't know when the next like's going to come. You might check your phone. It might be nothing, and then there might be a few that come along, and that kind of that's a common behavioral technique to get you more hooked on it, really. Variable reinforcement, automatic notifications, targeted content that I've already talked about. And if you haven't seen it, do watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix. It came out a couple of years ago. It's a very kind of what's the word I'm looking for, evocative, moving, thought-provoking film about the dilemma that young people face in their social media use. So check that out if you haven't watched it. It's well done. Substance abuse is also an issue, sadly, via social media. You can order drugs via Instagram and Snapchat and get them delivered to your home like pizza. I mean, when I heard about that a year or two ago, that was news to me, but that's happening a lot. Young people are doing this in increasing numbers. There's no longer kind of dealers, and dark street corners in the way that there used to be. They'll just come on a moped and someone will deliver it to you. And drugs such as lean is codeine, I think, and cough syrup and sweet sugary drinks all mixed up. It's very easy to make and get hold of if you're a young person. It used to be purchased via the dark web. Now it's social media. And I've got a colleague who works in this area, and he says it's very hard to kind of keep up with it all. How young people are accessing drugs, but it's very easy to get hold of it via Snapchat. So it's a dynamic environment, hard to really keep up with, but we need to be aware it's going on. So what about some possible solutions? I'm conscious of time and I'm going to finish soon. There are family-friendly filters that we can put on devices, parental controls, but young people often know more than adults about disabling these. I think we need to have kind of open conversations with our children, with teenagers that we come into contact with. The national curriculum tries to encourage that, children aged 5 to 16 talking about internet safety in a sensible, age-appropriate way. I hope a theme that you have taken away, apart from all the kind of worrying stuff I've shared, is that education is really important for young people and for us as adults. Parents need to try and view the world through their child's eyes. We're not going to turn the clock back. We're not going to make social media go away. And we need to see how much a part of their lives it really is, and how they can hopefully use it in a more thoughtful, helpful way, and protect them from the worst aspects of it as much as we can. I mean, website providers do need to police their sites more closely. There needs to be a better legal framework, which I will spend a couple of minutes talking about in a minute. I've mentioned Molly Russell already, but there are things like ourpact.com that you could look up. This is something where teenagers and their parents, make agreements, and the Wi-Fi goes off at a certain time, and so an agreement is reached that you won't have social media maybe in your bedroom or after a certain time. It's quite a good app for sort of encouraging a dialogue about that kind of thing. And if you search as a young person for depression and self-harm, you should not be directed to Amazon sites that sell paracetamol or knives or whatever, which can happen and has happened. It needs to be more intercepted with users being directed to counselling and resources that can offer support. And I'm going to come on to talk a bit more about those in a second. So it's a lot to do with the algorithms and how we respond. And we as adults could be doing a lot better on that. There's this concept of green time, where, you know, green time is time spent in nature and in the park, and that can buffer the consequences perhaps of screen time. And also that I'll publish a paper on that you could look up. This is something about the political side of all this. In May 21, an online safety bill was published, which made companies more responsible for their user safety online, especially young people and vulnerable groups. So the idea was that social media companies must remove and limit the harmful content that's out there. And it gave Ofcom powers to fine companies failing in this new duty of care up to 10% of their annual global turnover. So we're talking about billions of pounds that these companies make. So 10% is a significant amount of money, but I think that's how they're going to change their behavior, is if it hits them in the pocket, really. And there was also this new criminal offence proposed for senior managers, introduced as a deferred power if needed. So that would be like the chief executives at Instagram, Facebook, and so on, would be personally responsible if they weren't addressing these issues. And again, that would sort of give people a metaphorical kick up the backside to actually start doing something about it. Now, this was May 21. An awful lot has happened politically since then. A bit of an update: in July of this year, it had its first debate on its report stage. To get a bill into legislation is a big process in Parliament. Many of you will probably be familiar with that process. So it did have a debate in its report stage in July. But then, of course, we had Boris Johnson resigning and the Conservative leadership election. And, you know, a lot of us were lobbying at the Royal College of Psychiatrists and other organisations for stronger protections for children and young people in this bill. And we got quite a long way. And I actually remember having an online discussion with Nadine Dorries, who I'm not a massive fan of, but this was one thing that she did do that was potentially helpful as Culture Secretary, try and progress this bill. But now the next scheduled debate had been postponed until after the leadership election, which obviously was very recently finished. And we'll see what Liz Truss does about it and what her new government does about it. And there is sadly a chance that the bill may be dropped, which would be such a shame because so much work has gone into it. The trouble is it's associated with Nadine Dorries, who's no longer in the cabinet. It's associated with Boris Johnson. They might want to sort of distance themselves from it. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Or it may be heavily changed. I really, really hope that a lot of hard work doesn't get lost, but we'll have to watch this space and keep up the pressure on that. Just something briefly about COVID, that social media may have been very helpful for young people during the pandemic, and actually there's been an anecdotal possible reduction in cyberbullying during the pandemic, maybe people feeling a bit more supportive of each other. It's possible there may be more focus on positive aspects of social media going forward. I'm going to speed up because I want to finish soon, but the Big White Wall is a good thing to check out online. This is some of the positive stuff that's online out there about, you know, community of people who have challenges with their mental health can really get support from others. And it's called the Big White Wall because people kind of write their feelings on a brick, and then it can create a wall with other people writing how they feel, and it's a big white wall. It's anonymous. They have professionally trained wall guides ensuring the safety and anonymity of their members, and they have good outcome measures. It started actually at the Tavistock a long time ago. I remember conversations at Tavistock when I was an SPR there about 20 years ago about this, and colleagues such as Richard Graham, who's quite active in this area, helping to get it started. So that's a really positive thing that's out there. And there's quite a lot of other things as well that are out there. This I've talked about already, so I'll skim over it, but it was published in the Lancet, Viner et al., about the mediating effects of social media via cyberbullying, sleep and physical activity. This is more online resources that are useful. Tooth.com is often recommended by CAM services who are extremely stretched. I have come across young people who feel upset to be referred to sort of online stuff when they want to actually meet someone face to face. Resources do mean that more and more online stuff is being recommended, but on the other hand, some young people really find it very valuable to be able to access things from their bedroom or from home in privacy, finding stuff that is supportive online. So Couth.com has a lot of useful stuff. Netaware.org.uk is from the NSPCC, a kind of guide for parents. ChildNet International. You can report concerning things that you might discover online at the IWF. Good Thinking is one I quite often recommend, so check that one out. NHS approved kind of digital mental wellbeing for London. There's a lot of positive stuff on there. And Minded is from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and Health Education England supported that as well. A free resource for young people about their mental health, and for parents and for professionals as well. You can check out Minded. This is something about text support that's out there. If you text SHOUT to 85258 or text YM, which stands for Young Minds, to the same service, you can get support 24/7 via text and advice for anyone in crisis, mainly used by 14 to 24-year-olds. So just to conclude, the genie is out of the bottle. I think that was Claire Lilly, the NSPCC safeguarding lead, that said that about 10 years ago. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. We can't turn back time. So we have to deal with it. We as adults need to understand the seriousness of what's out there. I'm sure I've increased your awareness, at least to some extent, about that today. What young people may be exposed to. We as adults need to inform ourselves as parents, as clinicians. We need to try and discuss things openly. We need to try and see things through our young person's eyes. We need to remember about appropriate boundaries and not kind of give up about it all. And support our young people to do things that are healthy. For example, no phones in the bedroom, so that you're not tempted to look at things in the middle of the night, if you can manage to do that. And mental health can really be harm, but there can also be helpful aspects, which I hope you heard that I do see helpful aspects out there as well. And let's focus on the message rather than the medium. It's not that the internet is bad. It's not that social media is bad. There can be really positive stuff out there on the internet, and really positive aspects of social media, and there can be really harmful aspects as well. And of course, sometimes it can be good to disconnect to connect. That is just a little comic cartoon that I came across, a sort of distortion of behavioral techniques, but the idea that you can go on your iPad for 10 hours as a rule for actually being off it for 5 minutes. Anyway, thank you for listening. That's my email if anyone wants to get in touch. And that's me on Twitter. I do sort of tweet a fair bit about this and other issues as well. But yeah, thanks for listening. Sorry about the video glitches, but back to you, David.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for an absolute tour de force going through the complexity of these issues and their breadth as well as their depth. Before there's one question which has come up, which I'm going to get back to Leora's question in a minute. But
there I am. I've just clicked on it and suddenly it's worked.
Yeah. Oh, there you are. There you are. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I tweaked on
you
the
did
way.
Something. Yeah.
I tweaked on the way, but I didn't want to kind of interrupt.
Okay.
And also, don't forget, there's a video coming out, so the video will at least include your picture, your slides, and your image as they are, rather than a mixture. Really, you mentioned more information to parents and families. One of the difficult issues in other areas, considering the vaccine area, for example, is like that one size doesn't fit all. What are you, the college, the advocates, doing about, having the different messages? A different message in a family in Scotland, or in the poorer areas of Scotland, is going to be a slightly different message in the affluent areas of northwest London. What's happening about that?
Well, I would say certainly in my professional life in CAMS, one always tailors what one's saying to the young person, the family in front of you. So you're thinking about, where are they at? What's their awareness of things? And trying to tailor your message to who's in front of you. I'm not sure that there's specific different public health messages out there about social media in different areas. It's a good question. I know, I have recently been involved in a debate about public health messages about, for example, healthy eating. And we need to be careful not to just promote the message that obesity is bad. And, because there is an epidemic really of obesity, or certainly, very widespread obesity amongst young people. But we don't want to just say, eat healthily and lose weight. Because that can promote eating disorders. So we do need to think about our public messages And, talking about healthy food is a good thing, but talking about weight loss and not just simply not being fat is not a good thing. So we do need to think about public health messages very carefully in the way that you're suggesting, David.
The second thing is the overlap. In other domains, is where I talk about intersectionality between disability and health, or disability and LGBT status, or disability, or faith and ethnicity. What about intersectionality with social media usage and those characteristics? Are the disabled more vulnerable? Those that can't get out and about more vulnerable to the ill effects of this?
Yeah. I did suggest in my talk that people with pre-existing vulnerabilities, regardless of social media, are more likely to be, say, attracted to a paedophile, or more likely to be, harmed by looking at an image of self-harm, for example. So that's definitely, research has definitely shown that. I think people with particular difficulties, for example, if you're on the autism spectrum, sometimes you can be very, you can promote healthy contact with other people on the autism spectrum via social media. People find it quite a nice way of connecting. Some of the challenge, some young people found the pandemic quite positive for their mental health, which is a bit of an indictment of how some schools treat people who are, neurodiverse, maybe on the autism spectrum. Sometimes that can be a very, very stressful environment for a young person on the autism spectrum, and then being at home and being online and connecting with people in that way can feel much more kind of egocentric and much more kind of what they can manage. So I think for some people with some specific challenges, it can be very useful, social media. You mentioned something about gender and sexuality. I mean, one of the problems with it is things can get very polarized, and debates can get very polarized. It's quite difficult to have a nuanced debate or conversation in the way that hopefully we're doing a little bit now, if you're just sort of tweeting short messages backwards and forwards, or on Instagram or on Snapchat. And we know that, for example, the issue of gender identity and gender dysphoria is a massively complicated area. And maybe we can talk about that on another occasion in more detail, but it's a massively complicated area. And it's not either that you're either gender critical or gender affirmative, and it's sort of two camps. I mean, it's much more nuanced than that, really, I think. But if you look at social media, it's kind of like there's two camps and sort of shouting at each other. So that's one of the problems with social media. So things are not so nuanced in the way that they perhaps a more healthy debate would be.
Leora Harvard's posted two questions, which you can see, but I'm going to take the second one first.
Yeah.
Which is a specific one about how is CAMS coping with the deluge of referrals from GPs, plus requests for ADHD and autism diagnosis referrals. How's the workforce coping?
Not brilliantly, I would say. I think there's huge challenges at the moment. And they cope. I mean, GPs are really struggling as well, as I'm sure many of our audience will be all too aware of. I mean, and GPs and CAMS are two particular areas, but I think, it's a really tough time to work in the NHS. Liz Truss talked about the NHS being one of her three priorities. Let's see how they follow through on that. But I think we need to be, looking after the workforce. That's been a sort of theme of my career as a training program director, trying to look after trainees, and we need to be looking after ourselves as well. And that's hard to do in the current climate, sometimes, with people often working, way above and beyond what is sustainable. And I think that absolutely is happening in CAMS. There's a huge workforce problem. So even if more money is allocated to CAMS, they can't necessarily get the staff. We need to be training people up to work in it, but it needs to also be an appealing area with kind of manageable workloads. And I'm sure one could say exactly the same thing about general practice and other areas of medicine, that, we need to be making it appealing for younger people to come into. And also retention. I've been at GOSH for 20 years, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that, I at some point am thinking of leaving the NHS in the not too distant future, possibly, after having been a consultant for 20 years. And, that's partly to do with the pressures that are there. And things like the annual allowance and things like that, which we won't go into now. But, we need to be looking after our workforce at both ends and during a career as well.
So yeah, I mean, on that front, I mean, you say leaving the NHS. what is the role of the private sector in handling this question of social media? Are there
Yeah,
private? You can have private psychiatrists or psychologists. Are they handling this kind of question, or
they are, but obviously they're handling it with a minority of the population, people who can afford
yeah,
private medicine, which is not ideal. That a very small segment of the population can access better care in that way. So, it's a big problem. And I think there's creeping privatization. And I think, that we could really get into a political debate about this now, which maybe we shouldn't do. But I think there is creeping privatization. And I think there's an argument that in some ways it suits the government for services to be denuded and maybe replaced by the private sector. I don't know. It depends who you ask. And there's a range of views out there.
I'm not going to succumb to the depths of
Temptation.
saying that the new Prime Minister's statement that she's going to prioritise the NHS does not necessarily mean she's going to prioritise the maintenance and development of the NHS. It just means she's going to have it as a priority to do something.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed that ambiguity.
Involve.
Yeah, I noticed that ambiguity.
Anyway, let's get off the politics, because Laura's other question is a broader philosophical question. This is in the old days before CQC, I could have lovely toys in my consulting room, such as an abacus that I would clean after a kid drooled over it. Gone are those days. And now toddler will have an iPhone shoved under their nose. So how do we allow our toddlers to be kids? The pandemic has not helped at all with people to people contact. COVID toddlers are not used to seeing people in 3D, and I worried for the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about it as well. I think those are well-made points. I think play is a child's work, and I think that children really need the opportunity to play, and it's very helpful for their development. And that includes, running around in a park. And I mentioned on one of my slides about green time as well as screen time. So as parents, as educators, as clinicians, we need to be promoting that kind of thing. I quite often say to depressed teenagers that I see is that there's really strong evidence that exercise helps with depression. And let's maybe not rush for antidepressants. Let's think about whether you can be a bit more active and walk about a bit more and that kind of thing. So you can have sort of positive feedback loops through this kind of healthy activities in terms of your mental health. But I guess it's partly about schooling. I mean, I've been involved in conversations about why are we examining 6 and 7-year-olds, giving them SATs and testing them at such a young age when, in Scandinavia, they have forest schools and they're not testing and examining their 7-year-olds. They're encouraging them to get out there in nature and run around and play. So I think there's educational aspects of it that are important. It would be wonderful if we had a new education secretary who thought like that, I think, and promoted more of that. I somehow doubt we will have that. But, I think that's the kind of thing that we as people who work with children should be lobbying for. And I and others do try and do that. The importance of play and, play in the way that the questioner was talking about. And, you can still have toys in your consulting and things, but I do get what you're saying. Times are changing.
There's another angle also which has been thrust in my face recently, and which is kind of relevant. We've had the Battersby case going on for the last couple of months and playing out in the media in the last couple of months. It's been pointed out to me that in the Battersby case, social media plays a hugely important role. Yet, if you don't, because the child was allegedly using social media to, as you said, to access material which led to behavior that was, if not deliberately suicidal, was potentially suicidal, and led to his brain death. I'm telling you this, it's what I know, but if I were to take the media, I wouldn't actually know that, because it wasn't highlighted in the media at all.
Can you say a bit more about that link? I'm
Right.
partially following you, David. Can you say
Well,
a bit more about that link between
well,
social media?
what I'm trying to say is that here is a child
Yeah,
who was using social media to do some kind of game,
yeah,
using social media to link into some kind of game,
yeah,
which led to effectively lethal activities.
yeah,
Okay. Now, what troubled me is troubling me about the case is I'm involved in for other reasons. Nothing. I wouldn't. Not on child psychiatry reasons.
mm,
But what troubles me is that the national media that is reporting on the case has underreported the dangers and harms of of the harm of the things that you've been talking about.
yeah,
I mean, it's almost that the national media were complicit
mm,
with those who wanted to underplay that
mm.
element.
Yeah. Well, you may very well be right, and there's very powerful kind of lobbying influences sometimes,
Yeah.
and makes me think of energy companies and other things that are going on at the moment. Powerful lobbying, and I imagine social media companies are extremely good at lobbying. And maybe the fact that we've got so far as we have with the online harms bill, and it doesn't go any further. Goodness knows what lobbying has been going on behind the scenes that from organisations much more powerful than the Royal College of Psychiatrists.
Mm.
So I do worry about that kind of thing. And our media is not exactly neutral and balanced, is it either? So we've got quite a biased media in many ways, and it's quite influenced by big business, I would say, and these powerful groups.
But from what you're saying, this is a phenomenon that's occurring in other countries as well. It's occurring in French. I mean, presumably you're in contact with French and
Yeah, I'm less familiar with what's happening outside the UK, obviously, but I think it's definitely an issue. And in the States, I think it's a big issue, similarly to what I've been talking about.
oh, finally, I think to raise the question, and I gather from what you said that you're in favor of the bill.
Broadly speaking, yeah. I mean, it's quite there's some controversial aspects to it, and people who believe in freedom of speech are worried that it might be curbing freedom of speech. But I think, freedom of speech is a good principle, but I don't think we should be free to just expose young people to harmful material without any kind of boundaries or barriers to it. So I don't think it is a wild west that's out there, really, that quote that I gave in my talk. And I think we just need to be protecting our young people more. And, probably in 10 or 20 years, as Anne Longfield, the Children's Commissioner, said, we'll look back and think, what the hell, what were we playing at? That we didn't actually do more to protect children back in 2020 or 25 or whatever. That could well be the case. So we need to be more aware of what's out there, and we need to, I think, and many people think, be protecting children more, partly through legislation.
Well, that plus Leora's concern message is, I think, a good point to say thank you very much. Apologize for IT problems, and
No problem.
pleased that people have been able to see that you are as benign and kindly as your one shot image shows, and to say how much we've appreciated, or all I think everybody has appreciated the effort and the clarity and what we've learned tonight. This is
Thank you, David.
just to tell people that we've restarted this program now. This has been a introduction that will be difficult to come up to the same kind of high standards. But the next session is also on a topical matter. It's the whole question of the polio and the polio episode in London and in the United States, and what it means and what one's going to do about it and how one's going to do something about it. So that'll be on the 20th of September. So look forward to seeing we hopefully John as well as many of you as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you, everyone.